Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you, Shan, and thank you for the organizer to give me an opportunity to speak here today. In talking with Shan, what we were going to talk about, what will be of interest to the audience today, kind of a mix of students and professionals, and given also the situation in Europe in terms of what's going on in the CubeSat domain. He asked me, being right now the president and CEO of Taiwan, which is a mildly successful company in the US in the old picosat and nanosatellite space, to kind of do a little bit of a reflection on what happened in the last few years, so maybe 10 years or so, especially in the US market, when it comes to the whole picosatellite evolution, to use the terminology in the title, and to kind of understand how this can be traced in going forward. And if we see any trend that actually can be associated to a natural evolution, a natural progression that is similar to other industries, and if so, is that inspirational? How can that be applied to Europe or the international market? So here we go. Before I start talking about that, I just want to let you know why I'm speaking here and why my little bit unique story. I actually grew up 2.5 hours from here on Lake Lugano, a little town in the Italian side of the lake. And so mountains and lake, it's my life, and I embrace it every time I have a chance to do it. And at the time, I had no idea that what was going to be my career. And this is mostly, I'm speaking to the student now. So I left at a certain point. I went to the United States, not exactly knowing what the future will bring, but I knew I had some sense of what I wanted to do. And I ended up, this was 2001, I ended up starting doing CubeSats at the time. And so not knowing really what was going to happen with them, I ended up being one of the first universities, or developing one of the first CubeSats ever made, in collaboration with Cal Poly. I was at the time University of Kansas. So what that single event did to my life is actually pretty incredible. The lessons that I learned at that time, the mental approach that I learned at that time, the ability to take something that it wasn't mainstream and try to work with it and create a program around it, allowed me to get my next job, which was then with an established aerospace company to make small satellites. At the time it was called Squares Aerospace, in the military area. That one, that allowed me to get my next job, which was with SpaceX. Ended up being director of mission operations at SpaceX, and what that means is essentially I've been in charge for 7 years of developing the whole Dragon mission, from inception all the way to execution of the first 3 missions to the International Space Station. Now, why that is important to mention is because, believe me, I have applied during that job a tremendous amount of the lessons that I learned during my CubeSat experience. It may sound strange, dimensions are different, the environment is different, type of company is different, pressure is different. However, the ability to always be creative and to always find new ways to push and to optimize your design, it was an invaluable set of lessons that actually I applied. So now what we do is, after 7 years at SpaceX, which is kind of like dog years everywhere else, so it's 50 years of experience in any other company, I decided to go back and in the area that I love, which is the picosatellites. And now I joined Taiwan 1.5 years ago, and now in that job, I am applying the lesson that I learned during the SpaceX area. And so I am kind of bringing full circle in my life back into what I really enjoy to do, but with a different level of professionality and kind of like taking it to the next step. So that's the context in which I'm talking to you today. Let's reflect a second on what happened, and I'm giving credit here to the Journal of Small Satellites. In 2013 they published what I think is a very good paper with respect to the analysis of the first 100 CubeSat being launched. So just a few charts to talk you through. Number one is this chart just shows you the explosion, if you want, of the amount of satellites that launched. So good news, right? Look how we are progressing, look how much we have done in the last 10 years. Pretty good news. The next one tells you roughly the division. So how all these satellites, these 100 satellites, being divided into the different sectors. Good news here is that education is always present. It's got a somewhat fluctuating reality, which reflects the reality of the cycle of development of a CubeSat, roughly 2-3 years. So usually in university, that's the time it takes. The other great news is that the technology part has been increasing a lot. So CubeSat dedicated to do technology or even to carry technology or R&D in general has been increasing a lot, which is what in the inception of the CubeSat, that was one of the main applications, right? Let's help the big companies to do some of their R&D in the chip. That's how a lot of us got money to actually launch our fantastic university satellites. Other thing is science is fluctuating. Communication is peaking its head now and then, but we will see this is one of the trends that eventually will go higher and higher in the future. So again, very good news. We see kind of like a good variability. Now here goes the bad news. The bad news is the vast majority of the CubeSat failed. Either failed right away, never a contact mass, or they failed prematurely with respect to when the mission they were supposed to do. That's terrible news, because that tells us that as a community, we are not there yet to be able to claim that we can carry through the missions that we say we are. Now, in an educational environment, it doesn't matter, because I've been through, everybody that goes through it knows, 85% of your lessons are learned before you launch. Perfectly acceptable, no worry whatsoever. However, if we want to evolve in the market, and if we want to keep on growing as the Pico satellite community, CubeSat community, this is not a business case. This does not make for persons to want to invest into money, because they know they will not have the return on their investment. So what do we do about that? Well, let me do it, before I answer that, let's do a step back again. Let's look from a different perspective. Again, this is more to the US reflection. Different curves that traditionally in industry show the different progress and steps in between progress in applications, right? So the first one is the educational one, or R&D, educational, let's call it either way. You see that we have been following that, and there's been in the 2000s, 1999, 2000, the beginning of the universities developing. It's an incredible increase, so from 10 we are at 100 or 1,000, I lost count of how many around the world there are. However, the value, if you want, in terms of monetary and funding associated with the university, it doesn't grow exponentially, it just keeps on with a slope. Now, is it important? Is it a good thing? Absolutely. And if there are global growth that we should keep on enhancing and nourish? Absolutely. Does it make it for a business to stay and continue to grow? Not quite there. But what it does, it creates the basis for everything else that is going to build on top of that. Now, what is that? Government steps in. Naturally, in every single thing, in every single application, there is a moment in which some way or shape of the government does some research, sees some value, takes upon itself to provide an enabling opportunity to that technology. So it happened in the CubeSat as well. 2006, 2005, 2006, after a lot of time of lobbying, there has been the first signal of good amount of money invested into the CubeSat area. I give credit to the NASA GIMSAT team and to the NASA Ames team in general to have been among the first one, maybe the first one, to actually believe and see the potential of this. So people started talking about this. In the government, what happens is different agencies have got different time of purchasing, different time to be convinced because of the rotation, if you want, the turnover. So from the 2006, it took another couple of years before actually execution of additional government mission. You all know the Colony 1 and 2, that was DoD applications, the first real idea of saying, let's build a lot of satellites and let's give them out for specific DoD applications. It was mixed success. And then the NASA Edison was, after the GIMSAT, was the most significant introduction of funding from NASA in this case into the CubeSat. Right? Tyvek, we are very lucky, we were part of that Edison, we actually got the biggest chunk of it to do an incredible mission that has rendezvous, proximity operations and docking. And so this was in the effective execution in 2012, that's when it started. and we are now going to launch next year. But there are many other examples of that. And then there is now even more growth in QB50 that we are here celebrating, which is an incredible program. Sense, space weather. So you see that the government is doing what it's supposed to do. Is investing money, is seeing some of the outcome of that, and is actually getting a little bit of a trend within the government to try to go in that direction, also international, to use CubeSat or those platforms to do their experiments. The next steps, naturally, private steps in. When enough risk has been retired, and enough R&D has been paid for by somebody else, that's when the business people step in and say, okay, now I can make a business case out of that. I don't need to invest this much, I just need to invest this much, and I can get a big return if I have the right commercial application. Skybox, Planet Labs, on the news for everybody. They started 2-3 years ago, and now they've been reaping very good fruits of their work with big investors coming in, Google buying them, so it's been a very successful story. And then the overall global VC funding explosion. It now satisfies with Canopus, Altius, Satellogic, Autonet, and many others that are now getting funding from VC venture capital to actually go into specific commercial applications. This is fantastic. Now, what's fantastic is that the commercial path is the only way that actually you get the exponential growth. What do I want to talk about here, why this is important, is because this will naturally happen internationally. The time of entrance are going to be different, the time of the amount of money are going to be different, but it's a trend that has been proven over and over and over. Chances are that internationally, maybe slower slopes, but it may actually surpass in terms of magnitude, almost surely will, the magnitude that is in the US right now. So, hang in there, it's coming. With the evolution of the market and the industry itself, what happens is an amazing thing. There is an evolution of what I like to call the ecosystem around the CubeSat. You will see why it's important in a second. It's a natural progression. Things become more complex, but they also become more diversified. What it means at the end is that there is more opportunity to entry into this ecosystem. So broadens more and more the amount of people associated to, in this case, CubeSats. So it started with, let's make a CubeSat. It's followed with, well, if I can specialize in making a structure, or in making boards, or in making payloads, I may be able to actually make a living out of that and provide some help to the different people and sell it to multiple people. Oh, yeah, but I need the software. So now there are people that actually are specializing more into the software applications, being that the GNC area or ABCS area, or being that the pure operating system for CubeSats. We need to launch them because it's no longer enough to build them. So there are people specialized in launch. Licenses, as everybody that wants to launch knows, you ain't going to do that without the proper licenses. And so there are now services, companies that provide a service to say, don't worry about it, I'll take care of all of it. FCC, NOAA, ITA, different specializations. I know this division because I have a lawyer in every single one of those groups. And unfortunately, each one of them costs a certain amount of money. But do they help? Yes, they do. Have I done it multiple times myself? I have done it multiple times myself. Do I want to do it and can I sustain the growth with it? I can't. So, new opportunities for people to jump in and provide that service. Let's go on. Now it's launched, it's in space, mission operations. You need to man, you need a control center, you need a ground segment, you need a software that you can interface with to do command, telemetry, data analysis. That's great. Let's keep on going. So we have ground network. We have the operational software specialization. We partner with a company, for example, that's what they do. Assembly, integration, and testing. There are companies that only provide that. We saw a presentation earlier on, or yesterday, about a company just dedicating to creating a test lab in space with the concept of enabling more and more testing. Rapid prototyping is now a natural evolution. Everybody uses it for structure. You see where I'm going with this. Every single group, every single one of the circles represent an opportunity to enter in the ecosystem that is the CubeSat. So it's growing, and when people are looking at the value of what we provide as a community, you can see that for everybody's point of view, is becoming a much bigger value. One that I really care about, by the way, is mission assurance, and which comes with hardware in the loop and comes with FDIR, as two manifestation. Mission assurance, we'll go back in a little bit, is going to be, from my point of view, one of the fundamental points from now on in our community. And then nano-launch vehicle. That's the natural evolution in the launch services. Secondaries are great. Let's face it, that big explosion in secondaries that everybody was hoping has not happened. There are a lot, not enough. They don't keep up with the amount of satellites you guys are building, or we are building. And so nano-launch vehicles is becoming the de facto standard or where the market is going to go. Wow, so many opportunities. Where do I get in? Companies have evolved to keep up and try to meet or global as many of these opportunities that are out there. So, and I apologize, I don't want to mention all the companies, I just pick a few examples that people tend to know, but by all means, this is not a sponsorship of anybody, but you started with component suppliers, and you had the historical providers of component suppliers. You had new entry in the component suppliers of, I call component the board or the star tracker or onesie twosie that you need to buy in order to make your satellite. Then they start to say, well, wait a second, I am enabled to create a mission by myself. I have a platform now, I can sell the platform. Not everybody that started as a component migrated to that platform, a lot of people did, and so you start getting specialization with that domain, and then you go into the full mission. I don't only have to provide a platform, I can actually provide A to Z for everybody, all those circles that I showed before. So there are companies right now that instead specialize into, I say, getting the job done in terms of an application, and they take care of everything for the customer. Companies are evolving, new companies are jumping in at different places. Again, there is hope for everybody to get into the difference, what's best for you. An example, at Tyler is just simple for me to give this example. What we want to do, and I'll touch it very briefly, what we want to do is the upper right, the turnkey data products. That's what we specialize on. I always say what I like is to go to a customer that knows nothing about space, and I say, tell me your problem, or tell me your idea, and they tell me what it is, and I was like, great, don't worry about it. I'll come back in a week with the solution to all of that, and you're never going to have to worry about it. And that's what's happening, that's what we like. But what we found was that we couldn't do that in an optimal way, optimal in terms of performance and cost, without having to develop everything else. I couldn't just put together a kit, I couldn't just use what was out there. It would have been okay, it would have been optimal, and I couldn't scale it up with respect to the business. So we went all the way back to the chain, all the way to develop our own components and modules, and everything in between. So the product of that is good. We now have customers at every single level, but the main goal of the company is still up there. Companies evolve, industry evolve, ecosystem, performance and capabilities evolve. By all means, these values are notional. Once again, I'm sure that here and there are some of you making satellite with peak performances in any or all of these categories. But if you look at it in the last 10 years, there has been this kind of jumps, and I will not mention them all, but the processing power is getting pretty high, and it's going to go higher and higher. We are already at graphic memory usage in the terabytes of capability. Attitude control navigation from, yeah, it looks like I can use magnetic somehow, to, I want to know exactly down to the tens of or ones of arc second where I'm pointing at for certain applications, and we can do that with community. Mission lives from the, if it stays a month, that if I hear a bit, it's fine. All the ways to customers that don't even talk to you if you don't tell them you can stay there for 5 years. Can we do that? Absolutely we can. We have now enough data as a community to say conclusively cost stays there up until those amount of years if treated properly, if you tame it in the right way. Electrical power, from milliwatts generated by one solar cell, we are now at multiple deployables. In our case, we can generate almost up to 100 watts orbital average power, which is a significant amount of power for the size that we're talking about, and you go from there. You enable much more stuff. And the communication as well has been growing tremendously. So you see this evolution. I don't know exactly how this is going to evolve. Every single year, every single month, there is somebody new pushing in one of these directions. My take to you is always be aware of what the others are doing, because that's the trend. You always have to try to stay one step ahead of it if you really want to stay in this business. Costs have been changing tremendously. From what I used to call pizza money at the university, where essentially that's the money you use to make your CubeSat, and I had to go beg and plead to get $5,000 to put something together in my first one. You have now a trend of prices going up. Let me rephrase that. Value going up, which can be prices, or can be manpower, or can be components, or can be launches, but the overall. Again, numbers are notional, don't get too hung up to that, but right now if you want to do something in the minimum acquisition cost, so let's get it done. When you consider everything, including the cost of personnel, that I know students, you are valuable. Although they don't pay you, you have a value associated to the ecosystem of a CubeSat and in the market of a CubeSat. It is going to be around the 200 to 500 or more just to get it done, minimum, and launch it and operate it. So it's not insignificant. You go all the way to the $2–3 million, even more, for actually very complex mission in which reliability, mission assurance, documentation, testing becomes a very paramount aspect. Anywhere there in between, there is the entire world in the CubeSat and picosatellite domain. Now, you have seen all the different evolution. There is one more point that I want to make that actually is going to be a big changer from, at least from the US point of view, which is the ITA reform. So evolution in policies, which is great, and like always happen, policies catch up after everything else happens. So it's happening though, that we thank the government for being able to see that and act upon that. And I'm sure there's going to be more and more policies from the deorbiting kind, from other policies that are going to catch up and be conducive to the type of business we do. For who doesn't know, ITA reform, what it means is that a lot of the products that are in our industry, which use commercial parts, are going to migrate from State Department to Department of Commerce. In technical terms, from the initial list of the ITA regulated into the commercial control list that is the export regulated, which is a much lighter licensing methodology. What are the consequences of that? That companies from the US, in this case, are going to be able to ease their hoops that need to jump through in order to do international business, just selling their products abroad. They can use product as is to interface payloads now without having to be very creative on how to meet the ITA regulation and go through it. You can improve on products that you export. There are obviously, it's not as simple, there are areas there that you have to meet and rules that you have to comply to, but you can do that. It means that international collaborations with US companies are much easier now. And you can also now develop next generation of products abroad by leveraging on your technology, from the US in this case, that actually can be exported and go from there. Again, not clear cut, there are regulations, but it's much simpler. All of this, what it means, we are opening a European office. We've been working the last 6 months. I knew about this reform as soon as it came out, so we started doing due diligence. And we, for example, we got the official seal of approval from everybody in the government that our Intrepid and our Endeavor line can be taken as is. Are we going to be the only one? No, we're not going to be the only one. I'm pretty sure everybody else or a lot of other people in the US are going to go to that trend. Why is it good? It's because it's happening, what I was talking earlier on with the chair of the session, that allows that international collaboration and taking down the barrier that in an area like space, it's the #1 enabler for actually new technology to happen. So it's overall good news. So in summary, flawless execution with sustained growth. This is the sentence I tell to my guys at work every single day. I don't care how pretty the satellites are, I do care, I'm Italian, so I do have a sense of fashion. But I don't care how inexpensive they are, that's not the point. The point is to make them cost effective. I don't care how super engineers they are. What I care about is that we execute. We execute flawlessly, we execute to the customer demand, we meet the requirements, mission assurance, and we do the right job. As a community, we need to do that. Somebody yesterday told me, we can't hide anymore under the cover of, well, but you know it's a CubeSat. That doesn't mean a thing anymore. We are satellites, and we do space, we do meaningful business for a lot of people. So let's do it in the proper way and execute. They are providing real value, from engineering training all the way to commercial applications. The number of satellites is growing. The number of opportunity to enter in the business, so the diversification is growing tremendously. There is finally an acceptance that they can provide a very powerful, useful experience. What's happening from a lot of you, but it's happening to me as well, there are now the big companies, the established companies that come to us and say, how did you do that? Or which process did you use to actually get it done that way? Can we do it too? Can you teach us how you were able to tailor that process or policy or standard from NASA or so on, so that you are so effective, keeping down the cost, and yet achieve what you need to achieve? So that is happening a lot. Government and industry also developing are addressing key capability issue, which is the stretching a little bit the envelope, power and aperture, for example, but other key issues that are inherited limitations to the sizes that we use. And there is a growing array, especially in the commercial market, of specific niche missions applications that are coming, and the opportunities are endless, really, at this point. So it's looking up, it's looking great past 10 years or 12 years, amazing next 10, 20 years. You are in the right community, thank you for all the work you do. And that's, I think, is my speech today. So thank you very much.
So thank you, Marco, for this very fascinating and inspiring talk. So do we have any questions here in the audience?
Representative from the Swiss Space Center. I'm here. You said that the most or many of the CubeSat missions fail actually in orbit. So what would you recommend to the community to decrease the number of fails and increase reliability? What are the most common mistakes that are made?
What would I recommend? It's different depending on the type of failure, obviously, but the number one failure that has been is pretty much well accepted among the community is the communication. Is the fact that nobody can get the first contact from the satellite. Now, communication is usually viewed by lack of rigorous testing toward the end of the development, when actually you have to make sure that all the different startup scenarios and possible failures like battery draining that you come up or communication itself, they need to be taken care of. But also, one of the problems that is happening is there are no exact ways to track your specific satellite, especially when they come out in clusters. It's a big, which one is mine? And sometimes it takes a long time for them to be picked up, the right one, and the community, in this case, worldwide, is fantastic in providing as much information and shared as possible, but has become a big problem. And especially in the last couple of years, has been the number one reason why people couldn't make contact with their satellite. So that's definitely one of them. Power is another one. Again, to fail safe into the power that allow you to recover from an initial drainage. We call it the Lazarus mode in my company, which allow you to, even if you're dead, to come back up slowly but surely, and things like this. So those are the two main ones.
Okay, we have another question, so let's have a second question.
Thanks for the very nice presentation. So I'm Sultan from Microsoft in Shanghai. I see you mentioned that the ETA is subjecting some change from November 10th, and you are going to open office in Europe. My question is, in the CubeSat and NanoSat area, how the situation is in the US and China? Do you have any plan or any constraint for the CubeSat to enter into China?
Let me caveat the answer by saying that I don't speak officially for anybody. And no government, no company, this is my personal answer. And I am, from what I heard, and probably briefed, I am extremely sorry to say that unfortunately that specific relationship cannot yet be open to the point that we all would like to, from a business point of view. They tell me there is hope. They tell me there is, it's working. I mean, there are progress, but not just yet. And again, from a purist, international person that wants to have a community working together point of view, it's not the optimal answer, but it is what it is right now. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we cannot take any more questions at the moment. I recommend you track down Marco during the lunch break and ask what is the next big thing and try to steal it. So, thank you very much. Big hand to you again. And we're going very quickly forward with our